I just want to, and I of course want to thank Kelly Schulz for coming to talk to us today. You guys have her bio on the agenda, but she's the Senior Vice President of Communications and Public Relations for NOLA & Co., the city's official destination sales and marketing organization. She's a New Orleans native who returned home following Hurricane Katrina. I won't read the whole thing to you, but just a little bit of a background on her, and she has some awesome things to say to us regarding Ethics Month and all of those things. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're so glad you came back to New Orleans.
Thank you. Thank you to the board and Dr. Rogers for having me. It's a beautiful day. I appreciate you all being here on this gorgeous day when you probably want to be sitting outside. But thank you for inviting me. I was involved in PRSSA when I was a student. I went to LSU in Baton Rouge, and I graduated in the fall of '97. And I was really involved in PRSA, but especially in my senior year. And I really believe that PRSA was kind of that thing that made the difference for me between all of the other students and, kind of standing out in a crowd, right? I served as president of my chapter, and we raised funds to go to the national conference. And at that national conference is where I actually connected with Edelman, which is a big PR agency. And that's how I started my career, which led me through all of these series of events that have led me here. So I commend you guys for being involved in PRSSA. It's a great organization. Some of my team members are going to the PRSA conference in Dallas in November. If you want to meet with any of them there, they're going to be going because we really do value it. So thank you for having me. I'm going to talk a little bit about ethics, but in the context of how we market the city of New Orleans and how we've done that through some challenging situations, specifically Hurricane Katrina, COVID, and then also dealing with questions about crime and visitor safety, which is something that unfortunately we have to deal with. So I'll just start there and you guys jump in if you have any questions, okay? All right. So basically this is what I get to do. All of us at New Orleans & Company, we have about 90 employees. We're right down the street at 2020 St. Charles. We're a destination marketing organization. So our job is to promote the city of New Orleans and all of the great things that come with New Orleans. So it's our job to make sure our people are coming here for festivals, conventions, destination weddings, anything involved in getting visitors to come to the city, whether that's, a couple coming for a fun weekend or a 30,000 person convention or a Super Bowl and everything in between. It's our job to get them here and to get them to choose New Orleans compared to any other great destination that they could go to. So it's a pretty fun job. We have endless opportunity to get good news messages out about New Orleans. So basically, when I tell people I work for New Orleans & Company, they're like, what is that? At the end of the day, we say we drive the cultural economy because tourism and cultural economy here is big business, right? And prior to the pandemic, we employed almost 90,000 people. Now it's about 75,000 people. This is, I think, what New Orleans does better than anything is culture and tourism and hospitality and getting people to come to the city, and by doing so, we really drive our economy. This is just one look at all of the different types of businesses that we work with. In addition to being a membership organization, New Orleans & Company, we're a marketing organization, but we're also a membership organization. So companies that are hotels and transportation companies and all of the different culture bearers, the musicians, they're all members of ours. And so it's our job to make sure that people are coming to New Orleans and bringing them business. But if you think about, we're getting ready to host the annual meeting of the American Association for Anesthesiologists. If you think about those individuals and the premier leaders of the anesthesiology field in the world coming to New Orleans for a couple of days, sure, they're going to go to the convention center and have their meetings, right? That's why they're here. But hopefully they're going to go out to our restaurants and maybe they're going to rent a private room and, have a board dinner, or maybe they're going to go shopping for antiques on Magazine Street, or maybe they'll, rent or ask to hire a band or something like that. So this is a big impact on our economy, and we sort of have our hands in everything. So this is kind of how I look at when it comes to ethics. personally and professionally. I don't really distinguish between, as a PR person, I feel like you need to have good personal ethics to be able to be successful in business. I don't feel like it's something that you can kind of, turn on or off. The right way is not always the popular and easy way. Standing for right when it is unpopular is a true test of moral character. I had a chance to move away from New Orleans. I started my career in Dallas through a PRSSA connection. Started my career in Dallas. I'm born and raised here. My family grew up in St. Bernard Parish, so their whole home, everything was destroyed in Hurricane Katrina. At that time, I was living and working in Dallas. I had a great international job. I was like in my 20s and traveling around the world, and I was head of PR for this global association. It was an awesome job. And I was loving Dallas, and I'd come home to New Orleans whenever I could. But when Katrina happened, I got a call to come back home and leave this, stable job in a stable city. And Dr. Rogers knows, she's heard the story like 10 times. But, and to, come home to New Orleans and work for our organization, which at that time was known as the New Orleans Convention and Visitors Bureau. And people thought that I was crazy, right? Because people thought, why are you going to leave this, stable city like Dallas and go to a city like New Orleans, which was underwater, destroyed, and take on a PR job promoting tourism when the entire world had seen nothing but devastation and destruction, and people were like, just bulldoze New Orleans. And I decided to come home and promote tourism. So people thought I was crazy, but I knew it was the right thing to do. And so I looked at it as, I don't know how to rebuild a house, but I know how to do marketing and PR. And if that's where I can help the city in some little way, that's what I want to do. So I did the same thing. I came home, did that for 8 years, moved away to Memphis because I had an amazing opportunity in Memphis to work at St. Jude Children's Research Hospital. And they asked, after 6 years there, the folks at New Orleans and Company asked me to come home again, but this time it was in the middle of COVID. So people really think I'm insane to come home at the worst possible times, whether that be hurricane recovery or a pandemic. But both times I said yes because it was the right thing to do. And I was a little homesick. So I do not differentiate ethics between personal and professional. You need to kind of think of it in the same way, I think. And for me to be a spokesperson for New Orleans tourism industry and to build trust with the media and all of the things that I do every day at work, you've got to have that kind of personal level of ethics. So I like to share this slide whenever I talk with PR students because, obviously ethics is number one, and you can look at a lot of kind of textbook definitions of what PR means and what it is, but I want to share with you what I actually do every day, and this is what it really is, y'all. Okay, I've been doing this since '97, and so this is what I do every day. I mean, you're a writer, you're an editor, you have to manage crisis situations. I have the honor of being a spokesperson for our company and for New Orleans tourism industry, which I take that honor very seriously and know that I'm speaking for a lot of people who make their living through tourism. You have to be a strategist and figure out how you're going to handle really tough situations, and I'll talk you through some of those today. You have to know how to manage a team of people. I have a wonderful team of professionals, and you get promoted in your job because you're good at your job, but that doesn't mean that you're good at teaching or mentoring other people to do their jobs, right? So becoming a people leader is a skill that you really need to do as you're going to kind of move up the ladder in your career. You need to be able to read the mind of the CEO, which is not easy. I've had the honor of working with several CEOs directly and trying to stay one step ahead of the CEO who sees the big picture and is looking at, I may be looking at the next 15 minutes and how are we going to handle this media request, but the CEO is looking at 15 years from now, right? So being able to, and I'll never be as smart as they are, but try and stay one step ahead of them. You need to be able to advise other executives, to get buy-in on other executives who are, also in many cases, very strong personalities, run huge pieces of the business, see things a certain way. You have to be able to get buy-in from them and influence them. You have to look out for trends. and what's coming up, how to stay ahead of those trends. You, of course, have to provide wonderful customer service. There's a lot of times when journalists will call me from some of the local TV stations and say, I need to do a story for Sunday night. And the best time for me to tape the story is Sunday morning at 8:30. Okay, now I'd rather be not in hair and makeup on a Sunday morning at 8:30 doing an interview, but that's part of the job, right? And I know that if I tell that journalist yes to that interview, they're going to come back to us again and again and tell the stories that we want to tell. And it's just having a good relationship. So whether it's a journalist or any other person you deal with, having those customer service skills is critical. You have to know how to plan events. You have to kind of predict the future, and you have to be able to know how to do budgets and finances. And if y'all are like me, you went into comms because you didn't want to do all of that. But you have to know it a little bit, okay? Like right now, I'm working on our budget for 2023, and you have to be able to defend it to the CFO and to the CEO and to the board of, you know, why are we asking for this amount of money? What are we gonna do with it? Especially, we're a nonprofit, right? We don't have like endless budgets. So how are you gonna spend it? What is the return? And what does that mean? You know, people on our board are hoteliers, and you know, they run major companies, and they're like, how is that gonna fill up my hotel, right? And you gotta be able to articulate that. Any questions on that? Okay. So these are some things that I've learned over the years in dealing in crisis. And so I talked about, like, I'm gonna talk about ethics in the context of crisis and crisis management. And whether it's Katrina or COVID or any other thing, you know, these are kind of the three things that I've learned that I think hold true in every situation. So, you know, for us, we need to be the trusted source for New Orleans' most important industry. So if you think about, you know, Hurricane Katrina, or, you know, when the entire world was seeing horrible images of the city, and, you know, we literally had dead bodies floating in the streets. And then our job was to come in and say, but you can still come back and go to Mardi Gras, right? I mean, like, that's a pretty big jump, you know? So we knew that there was a time after Katrina, and there was a time during COVID when it wasn't appropriate for people to be here. And we had to say that. So telling people not to come or don't come right now is so hard for us, because that's literally our job, to get people to visit New Orleans. But you had to do that. The worst thing we could do was to say, everything's fine, come on down, and then it wasn't fine, right? So having that credibility, always being the trusted source. You know, I'm thinking about the folks in Florida right now who are dealing with that horrible hurricane, and how they're gonna have to sort of, you know, at some point welcome visitors back. Clearly now is not the time in many parts of the state. So you have to make sure that if you're saying something, it's truthful. It's not too rosy of a picture. It's not just, you know, spin. It's about, maybe we can't welcome you right now, but when we are ready, we're gonna tell you. Always ask, how do you know that? And my team, they don't like when I say this, but they'll come in and say, you know, or if you're in a hurricane situation, you know, I would sit in the war room with Mayor Landrieu and other mayors and represent the tourism industry, and everyone would be going around the table and giving their updates, right? And so someone from Public Works or whatever department would say, well, there are 17 streetlights that are not operating, you know, on these 12 blocks. And the mayor would say, how do you know that, right? Which it sounds so basic, but you have to be able to confirm it. You can't just say it because you heard it or you saw something on social media. Like, you've got to be that authoritative source and say, I know it because I've seen it with my own eyes, or I'm talking to my team member who's watching it right now. Like, asking how do you know that it sounds very basic, but in a crisis situation, it's critical so that you don't spread misinformation. And then show, don't tell. After Katrina, it was critical for us to show people images of the city kind of before and after, right? So we showed people what different tourism landmarks looked like before and after. In many cases, they looked the same, right? Because most of the devastation from Katrina was where my family lived, and like out in the suburbs, right? And other parts of the city. But being able to show visuals, being able to give people exact dates, exact locations. You know, people don't always understand geography. During the BP oil spill, people would call us and say, do you have oil on your beaches? Well, we don't have beaches in New Orleans, but people don't know that, right? So as much as you can be specific and show them and not just tell them, that is going to help. So, you know, Hurricane Katrina, I still get like a sick feeling in my stomach when I see this, even though it's been since 2005. You know, from a tourism standpoint, we had to, again, convince the world that at a certain time it was okay to come back to New Orleans and trust in New Orleans again. And we had to do that despite the entire world seeing images like this. And this is unfortunately what we're seeing come out of Florida today, in some parts of the state of Florida. But, you know, how do you go from that to bringing back Mardi Gras, bringing back conventions? You know, all of this stuff was a very difficult thing to do, and we had to have the most highest ethics and transparency to be able to do that. So this is kind of how we, when it came to messaging and PR for the destination after Katrina, you know, at first it was a tale of two cities and just educating people on the French Quarter is dry. You know, many parts of the city are okay, but then you've got this other parts of the city, like where my family lived and all these other neighborhoods that are underwater. So differentiating between the tale of two cities, like you've got the core tourism districts that are okay, and once the convention center and Superdome and the Hyatt and some other things were rebuilt, that experience was relatively normal. Now you can drive out into the suburbs and see catastrophe, but we needed to do this kind of tale of two cities message. And I saw that firsthand when I was living in Dallas and I came home. You know, I checked into a nice hotel and was getting ready to do my interview and came right down the street here. And I didn't see any devastation. My parents were like, hold on. They put me in the car and I went and saw my childhood home and saw the devastation of St. Bernard Parish. And you couldn't even, and what I was seeing was the cleaned up version. Okay, so I saw it 6 months later. Katrina hit in August of 05. I was here for my interview in March of 06. So I was seeing the cleaned up version, and it was still devastation beyond anything you can imagine. So, but then I went to the French Quarter, and my hotel was lovely. It was fully staffed. There was music playing. It was like, so it was this very difficult kind of thing to articulate, but we did that. Our next message sort of evolved into seeing is believing, and letting customers at a certain point and journalists come and see for themselves, right? They were very skeptical when we would say, we want you to come back. But once they would come here and see it for themselves, for the most part, they were convinced, right? And we educated them on the fact that, you know, what the residents are dealing with insurance companies and rebuilding houses and FEMA and all of this stuff, that's not going to be your experience as a visitor, right? You can still come in and enjoy the city and eat good food and listen to music. And, you know, people would say to us, when we had Mardi Gras 2006, that was, you know, kind of a controversial thing, like, are we going to go forward with Mardi Gras? And people would say to us over and over again, how can I feel good about coming to New Orleans and going to a big party like Mardi Gras when there are so many people that are suffering, right? That's a logical question. And our answer was, because the people that are suffering are throwing the party, and they want you to come back. And without you and without tourism, these people are not going to recover and rebuild, because tourism is what drives our economy. And then finally it was, come back, come help us. You know, we had hundreds of thousands of convention groups and church groups and just people from all, you know, college kids from all over the country that wanted to just come and help, right? So, you know, my family's home was cleaned out by some college kids from the Northeast. And that is like manual labor, you know, disgusting, gritty, emotionally tough work to do to clean out somebody's home. And they did it, and they were happy to do it, you know? So we invited people to come and, you know, enjoy yourself, support our economy, but also be part of this kind of massive rebuilding of a great American city, because there's no America without New Orleans. These are just a couple, this is more on the ad side than PR, but I just have to show you, this I think is the greatest ad I've ever seen in my life. Soul is waterproof. We put this everywhere around the world. We were lucky enough to get some federal dollars to market the city, because we had to get money back. You know, we had to get some additional funding to be able to market New Orleans around the world. And when the time was right, this wasn't until like 2007, so almost a year and a half after the storm, but putting messages out like this, like Seoul is waterproof, nothing is going to ruin New Orleans' spirit, you can still come back and visit. People would always ask us if the streets were dry. Dry? We were never dry. And has this like beautiful woman drinking a cocktail. So just kind of playing on the spirit of New Orleans and that was all still here after this terrible, terrible disaster. So with Katrina, the whole world was focused on New Orleans, right? And the Gulf Coast of the United States. It was an isolated incident and people wanted to come and help us. Well, fast forward to COVID in 2020, every destination in the world was now essentially under lockdown, right? So everything we do, promoting festivals, people going out to eat, listening to live music, massive conventions, people gathering face to face, all of those things were instantly gone, right? And we weren't getting any pity from anybody because the whole world was dealing with the same thing. So again, we had to be really, putting our ethics front and center and be really clear about what people could do and what they could not do, right? So I came home the second time in September of 2020. So it was still it wasn't like the lockdown months, but it was still very much there was no vaccine, people couldn't travel, they didn't want to travel. We, faced a lot of backlash from some local citizens who were like, I can't believe you guys are even still open. Like, why would you ever invite a visitor here because they're going to bring COVID? It was just a very tricky time. So again, we had to kind of evolve our messages over time, and this is what we did. So the first thing was safety first, okay? And whenever I'm talking about COVID or crime or anything else, it's not just about the visitor, it's about all of us who live and work here, right? And it's about all of the people who work in the hospitality industry. And, we live here, we work here, we raise families here. So the first message was safety first. And so we're not a government agency, we're not doctors, we're not the CDC, but whatever those leaders were saying, that's what we would tell people. And, if you are going to come here when things were open and we were able to welcome guests again, great, but you got to follow the guidelines. Like, please wear your mask, please socially distance, please do whatever was in place at the city at that time, which kept changing, and it was confusing for people. And sometimes the state would do one thing and the city would do another thing, but it was our job to say, here are the rules that are in place. Please adhere to these rules for your safety and for ours. And so there were some people that said, I don't want to come back. I'm not going to come back if I have to show my vaccine card. I don't want to be there. And so that was fine. They had to make that choice. But our job was to say, please, safety first is what matters. We also went through this phase where we knew people couldn't come here, especially people internationally, but we gave them ways to celebrate New Orleans at home, right? So I did an interview with the TV station in New Zealand and talked about, here's New Orleans music you can download. Here are some, ways that you can make a king cake, or closer to home, we'd say, here's ways that you can get a New Orleans king cake shipped to you, Here's some history of Mardi Gras beads. And so trying to find any way to bring New Orleans culture to people so that they could have their own celebration in their own homes at a time when we knew they weren't able to physically get here. That was kind of fun. It wasn't as great as getting people here, but we got really creative, okay? When you're ready to return, we are ready to host. We knew that it was going to take people a lot of time, and everyone was on a different kind of time frame of when they felt comfortable, when they were comfortable traveling again. And so we weren't going to pressure people. We made it very clear, when you're ready, we're ready for you. We then kind of went into this sort of, you can still come to New Orleans and unwind, but you got to mask up first, right? And so I thought that was cute. Some people thought it was like the dumbest thing ever. But again, we were promoting safety first, right? And if you're going to come here, we want you to be safe and follow the guidelines. And then throughout the entire thing, and we're still dealing with this, we had a website, neworleans.com/COVID safety. We promoted that to everyone, to our members, to everyone that was coming. It was like, we don't make the rules, but here are the rules. Please follow the guidelines. So having that that constant transparency was very important. These are a couple of PR things that we did, some specific tactics. Y'all remember Mardi Gras 2021, there were no parades, right? And how weird was that? So normally on Mardi Gras Day, we broadcast from our office down St. Charles Avenue with Rex and Zulu rolling by, and I get to be the spokesperson, and y'all, it's like I'm a spokesperson for Mardi Gras for New Orleans on a balcony at 9 o'clock in the morning with champagne on live TV, speaking about why people should come visit New Orleans. It's pretty cool. It's my favorite thing I get to do for my job. But in 2021, we didn't have any parades, right? So we were like, what are we going to do? So we went to Mardi Gras World. This is me in like a feather mask, and we're in Mardi Gras World, which is a big warehouse, and it was freezing. I don't know if you remember Mardi Gras 2021. It was like 20 degrees outside. It was so cold. We were in this big warehouse with all these floats, so it was a beautiful visual, but there was no heat. But anyway, we did the interviews anyway, right? So Mardi Gras Day, from 5 a.m. until about noon, we went live with all of these TV stations all over the country and hit every time zone and said, look, there may not be parades rolling in New Orleans this year, but we're still finding our own ways to celebrate. We're doing house floats and we're doing whatever else to celebrate, and we want you to come back for next year, talking about this year, right? So in 5 or 6 hours, we reached 30 cities and 2.6 million visitors. So that was a pretty cool thing. And again, in those interviews, I mean, it was fun and colorful and all of that. And everywhere else, it's just a normal Tuesday, right? But here it's Mardi Gras. And, but they ask questions in those interviews about COVID and crime and other things, and you address them head on, right? And we prepare for those kinds of things so you weren't caught off guard. Going back to the kind of seeing is believing idea, we have hosted probably more in the past 2 years than we've ever done, is bringing in influencers, right? You guys know about influencers, I don't have to tell you, but getting them to come to New Orleans to see the city, experience it for themselves, reach, hundreds of thousands of people on their Instagram channels and other channels. And we've done all different types. Like, this is a woman who is the traveling Black Widow, and she reaches out to people who may be traveling on their own as, single travelers, right? This guy was something called the Endless Adventure, so it was a completely different audience. So our team spends a lot of time getting journalists and influencers to come to the city, and especially when you're coming out of a crisis, that's been really helpful, right? So it's not just us saying come visit, it's them saying it. We've been there, we've experienced it, and this was our experience, right? We've also, sorry, there's a mistake on there. After this slide, I'm going to ask you to show that other clip if you want to try and figure out how to pull that up. There's all kinds of stuff here. The point is, this is the COVID safety plan I was talking about, our website for COVID safety. We talked about how we've always focused on the highest safety protocols. We talked about the vaccination rates in New Orleans. New Orleans has a pretty high vaccination rate, which was an encouraging statistic for our visitors, so we always promoted that. During Hurricane Ida, y'all remember last year it was like Hurricane Ida and then the Delta surge, and like the hits just kept on coming. Remember, like Jazz Fest was canceled, and it was just like one thing after another. And so part of what we do during a hurricane is to make sure that we're communicating with our members and telling our customers, anything you need to know, go to neworleans.com and we're going to put the latest information on there, right? And the latest information could be flight status from the airport, which we give you the official source from the airport. Or it could be, what percentage of the power is off in the city, or what percent of the buildings are open and occupied, that kind of thing. So, and then we also, the New York Times and Travel Weekly and all these different media outlets that we work with, they come to us too and say, what are you guys doing, right? Like, they're not going to necessarily ask us about recovery, but they're going to say, like, when are you ready for customers? What's going on? And they tell their readers about what's happening. So, so that's COVID. The final thing I want to cover, and then I'm happy to take any questions, is crime, right? And you know, some of you guys have seen, I'm sure recently, that New Orleans received a very unfortunate designation as the murder capital of the US. I don't know if those stats are accurate, but I know that's what our customers are reading and hearing, right? And so, you know, for us, it's our job to try and overcome as many obstacles as we can, right? Like, we've got to convince people that are bringing 30,000 physicians or other people to the city why they should come to the city. And if they hear about crime, you know, numbers or anything like that, we understand why that's a little bit, you know, unsettling. So again, we have to be absolutely transparent. We have to talk about it from the context of, it's not just visitors that of course we want visitors to come and have a good time and to be safe, right? And want to return. But it's not only about the visitor. It's about all of us who live and work here and promote the city too. So let's see if we can pull up that video. This is like a 2-minute Fox News thing that I did. So take a look at this and then we'll talk about it.
The murder capital of the country. Tourism leaders say they are concerned but still optimistic about the future. Natasha Robin explains.
When New Orleans makes national headlines for being the murder capital of the country, people like Kelly Schulz of New Orleans and Company say she has to work even harder to sell the city.
It means that we're getting questions from our customers about what it means for them. And it's not just the headline that we're concerned about, it's the reality of the situation.
209 homicides so far this year, according to the Metropolitan Crime Commission. That's 52 homicides for every 100,000 people in New Orleans, a statistic that has a lot of people worried.
And what we are doing, not only to attract visitors to the city, but for all of us who live and work in New Orleans.
Schulz says people from all over the world, like convention planners and travel agents, are calling her office to ask about their safety in New Orleans.
When we see those negative headlines, they see those as well. And they will call us and ask about what's really happening in the city. So it's certainly challenging.
She says they talk to people about their partnership with the NOPD and some of the plans to tackle crime.
Because it's about being able to attract businesses here to create jobs, being able to attract people to live here, to fill those jobs. It's about tourists, it's about conventions.
Michael Hecht with G&O Inc. says while the headlines are alarming, the tourism industry is doing well right now.
The fact is that business is still booming, tourists are still coming here because there's so much pent-up demand coming out of COVID for the intimacy, for the culture that New Orleans offers.
We are getting the calls. So far we've not had any business cancel. Just yesterday we announced that New Orleans will host the Miss Universe pageant in January.
And moving to the next round is...
Schulz says it's a first for New Orleans and a great opportunity to show off the city.
We're going to have 90 contestants and their delegations come from all over the world. The show is broadcast in 165 countries and it reaches 500 million viewers.
She says it will take everyone working together, from the tourism industry to public officials to the residents, to make New Orleans a safe place for all to enjoy.
Yes, it's about the visitors and it's about the headlines, but it's also about the reality.
Natasha Robin, Fox 8, Local First.
Thank you. So, y'all noticed that I did not get up there and say, crime's not a problem. I didn't get up there and dispute whoever came up with the title Murder Capital of the USA. I didn't say that. And so I tried to be as honest and transparent as possible and talk about the solutions, you know, and there are some really good things that are going on. You know, there are 75 more police officers that are on the streets right now than there were, you know, 2 weeks ago. And there's this great group called the NOLA Coalition, and I could go on and on and on about all the good things that are coming out of the NOPD and that are happening. So that's our job, is just to kind of tackle the issues head on, talk to our customers, connect them with the NOPD, anything that they have concerns about, to help address that concern, and then just to, you know, put out kind of common sense visitor safety tips. I'm not a law enforcement expert, right? But we have the experts tell us, here are some things, and it's stuff that we all know. I'm sure it's stuff that you all do. being part of a college campus, right? And to be mindful of your surroundings and not be walking down the street like this and not know what's going on. And, so just those common sense safety tips. If you're at the convention center and you're wearing a badge that says you're from Idaho, take that off before you go walk around the French Quarter, just for your own safety. So anyway, I think, we've done that. So I've got a couple more things I can show you, but I want to be done by 1:30. And so I'm happy to, at this point, take any questions you guys might have. Yes?
I was actually wondering about the Miss Universe, because obviously I know they're coming in January.
Mm-hmm.
Because of the newest, where the murder capital of the state, has that been impacted in any way? Do you think that'll get people away from New Orleans?
Well, we are very fortunate because Miss Universe, the president of that organization, is a woman who loves New Orleans, and she actually contacted us to pursue hosting it in New Orleans. And the last time that they held this event was in Israel. And if you look at all of the positive publicity that Israel received from hosting this, I haven't talked to them about it specifically, and I'm working closely with their PR people. I don't know if that's a concern of theirs, but the event is going to happen here. And we are really excited about it. As I said in that news piece, so there are people coming here from 90 countries who are going to compete in the event, but then they bring their delegations from their countries. And then, not only is it going to be a great opportunity for New Orleans to fill up hotels and restaurants, and I was talking to one of our hoteliers the other day, and they said, well, I've booked a private party for the Brazil delegation or the Italy delegation. That's really awesome business, And these women are very accomplished. They're huge influencers in their own countries, right? They go on to be surgeons and diplomats and business leaders. And so we are lucky to have them in our city. And not only that, it's going to be broadcast in 165 countries. So 500 million viewers. There is no way with our marketing budgets that we have currently that we could reach that kind of an audience, And then the beautiful thing of this partnership is that they're going to work with us, on how do we portray New Orleans during the broadcast, right? So we will have some say in the set design maybe, or where the contestants will go. And we've talked to them about, let us show you some of the more cultural sides of New Orleans. So we may not have the contestants on a balcony in the French Quarter with beads, which is kind of what everyone thinks about New Orleans. Maybe we'll have them in the sculpture garden. So trying to kind of put out different visuals and different messages about New Orleans culture. And they have been open to some of those ideas. It's their show and they'll have the final say, but they've been great partners and we're really excited to have them here. Yes?
Throughout all of this, it seems like you've done a lot of convincing, at least to either journalists or influencers, to come to New Orleans or just participate in New Orleans culture itself. How do you convince journalists without getting to the point of annoying them, or just keeping that relationship
Yeah.
still intact?
That's a good question. We're very lucky that we have so many journalists that want to come to us. I mean, of course, we do some proactive pitching and we invite people, but majority of people come to us and they're eager to come visit the city. So we're very lucky in that way. I remember during Katrina, for the 1-year anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, we had all this international media come from around the world, and so we kind of set up a media center downtown, and we allowed media to come and get a credential, and that credential, gave you access to all these different experts, not just in tourism, but everything. So if you needed to talk to the governor, their people were there. If you needed to talk to FEMA, they were there. If you needed experts on coastal restoration or mental health or whatever, everybody was there. Okay, so any kind of story you needed, we had resources for you. There was a woman from Japan. And this was an example of someone that wasn't really convinced, okay? She was from Japan and she kept saying, this was a year after Katrina. And she said, what is taking so long? What is taking your recovery so long? And she didn't get it. And she wasn't trying to be disrespectful. She was just questioning, what's taking so long? It's been a year, And we literally put her in a vehicle and drove her around to the Ninth Ward and Lakeview and St. Bernard and some other places. And she was speechless. And she said, now I get it. So we're lucky that most journalists don't find us annoying. They want to come visit. We have great relationships. I have a wonderful team, and they go above and beyond. We had a group of journalists in town from Germany last April, and the vaccines for COVID were available in the US, but they weren't available in Germany. So we set them up at a COVID vaccination site at the convention center. So, and they got the 1-dose vaccine, and they went home back to Germany fully vaccinated. And then we brought them a little bag before dinner that night and brought them little bags of Tylenol in case their arms were sore, So it's like, that's hospitality. That's what we do. And we try and have that kind of relationship with every guest that we have, so that they do want to return and have that connection with us. Yeah.
So I'm from New Jersey, and anytime I told people I'm going to New Orleans for college, a lot of people would kind of question, surprisingly, the homelessness in the city, and I was always like, I don't really know what to tell you. But I was just curious, is that ever a concern to people that bring that up? Because I feel like a lot of people are just like, oh, there's a lot of homeless in the city, and I don't, there's not too much to do about that, but is there anything that y'all do on that side of things, talking to influencers and journalists when they
Yeah, I mean, whether it's crime or homeless or, graffiti or closed down businesses, every major city unfortunately has that. We unfortunately, I'm sure you all see it every day, like I do too. One of the things that we do, not on the PR side, but we have our incoming CEO and our VP of External Affairs, they actually go and meet with city council people and meet with the mayor. And that's not necessarily my role, but they're trying to focus on the solution, right? And how can we be part of the solution to help, homeless people who need a place to live, or what can we do? Even though we're a sales and marketing agency, again, we want to be part of the solution, right? And so they work with city leaders on different plans to try and make that work. On the crime front, our company actually funds patrol cars that go through the French Quarter. There are these little vehicles that have the New Orleans and Company logo on them. And so that's something that we've stepped up to pay for and fund, just to kind of supplement the New Orleans Police Department. And so we actually pay for the vehicles and we pay for people to staff them. So it's an extra level of security in the French Quarter. So, sometimes it's about telling the story. Sometimes it's about kind of getting behind the scenes and, trying to make change so that people will have a better experience when they come here.
Just back to Anna's question, I know journalists come to you. What about when you worked for St. Jude's? Did they come to you just like they do here, or were you having to?
Yeah. So when I worked at St. Jude, St. Jude is a children's hospital that helps kids with cancer and other life-threatening diseases, and it was life-changing to be around that. I could talk to you all day long about, one of the things in my job, I get to meet a lot of famous people, and for a while when I went to St. Jude, my family members would say, "Who'd you meet this week?" Right? Like, which celebrity? And yes, I met a lot of famous people, and I appreciate them for supporting St. Jude because there's so many great charities out there. But the celebrity to me was the 5-year-old kid that's a cancer survivor that I met, right? So that is like a life-changing mission. And yes, many of the journalists came to us, and there were like philanthropy trades and stuff like that worked with us because I was part of the fundraising group that raises the money for St. Jude so that all the families can come and not have to pay for any medical treatment for their kids, right? It's really a beautiful, beautiful place. But, St. Jude, we did fundraising events all over the country. And we would have to go, we were based in Memphis, Tennessee at a hospital, but we would have to go all over the country and convince people in Seattle or Miami or other places why they needed to raise money for St. Jude and give news coverage to St. Jude, which is one hospital in Memphis. And they would say, well, I have a great children's hospital here in Miami or in Seattle, and they do. But St. Jude is a specialty hospital, right? So it was kind of a challenge for us to have to go into markets where media may or may not know about St. Jude. They don't understand the specialized nature of this model that, you can be sent to St. Jude from another city and get this life-saving care that maybe you can't get in your hometown. So that was a challenge, right? There was always competing news, and we did so many things to raise money. We did marathons and golf tournaments and gave away dream homes, and people could bid on a ticket and win a house. I mean, like there were, and people left us money in their estates. I mean, like just there's such a massive, so many different media outlets to work with and so many stories to tell. So that was a little bit more challenging, but we did fam trips to St. Jude. We had journalists come, and I approached it the same way I did bringing media here to New Orleans, getting people to actually come to the hospital, and this was all before COVID. Getting them to come to the hospital and take a tour of the campus and meet some of the patients, and then after that it's like you get it, and you're sold. So
Thank you.
yeah.
You with the Soul is Waterproof Act,
Mhm.
you mentioned
Yeah.
like knowing when the time is right. Like I was just curious, like in just your experience, like how do you know?
How do you know when the time is right? That's a good question. I mean, well, for us, everything was a milestone, right? So the milestone of the Superdome reopening and the first Saints game, which was about a year after Katrina, the Convention Center reopening, the Hyatt Hotel reopening. So for us, everything was kind of a milestone. Every time a new restaurant reopened, or, anytime we hosted a major group of people, so it's kind of hard to tell, but for us, we felt like the beginning of 2007, we were, beyond a year. Many of those big iconic tourism buildings that we promote and fill were open again. And we felt like that was the right time. But in each situation, you have to kind of look at it. Doing research helps. If you can do focus groups with your customers. We had this sort of advisory board of meeting planners who would tell us, like we would run some of this by them and they would say, I love it or I hate it. And that kind of helped guide us. And just listening to your customers, doing research helps. But then in our case, some of it was just like our gut, and what felt right. And that, again, speaks to the ethics. Like you've got to have those kind of, morals and wanting to do the right thing. And not just saying, come back and visit, everything's fine, because it wasn't fine for a long time. So, yes.
We were talking about Hurricane Katrina, you referred to the war room. Can you talk about that a little? I don't know if
Yeah.
may understand
Sure.
what you're talking about. I know what you're talking about.
Sure. So, for Hurricane Katrina, for the 1 year anniversary, I think is how I mentioned that. We knew that for the 1 year anniversary of Katrina, there were going to be hundreds of thousands of journalists come to the city to report on a variety of things. And this wasn't like an example of a Super Bowl or something where you can like credential a bunch of media and give them a ticket to a thing and they can go to that thing and cover it. This was, we're coming to cover an entire city and an entire region a year after this massive disaster. And we knew that the stories some of them was going to be about tourism and culture, but there was also going to be a need for them to tell stories on coastal restoration and mental health and education and housing and population redevelopment and a number of other things, right? And that they were also going to want to talk to the governor and the mayor and the senators and the congressional delegation and all of this stuff. So we needed to figure out what to do. And there were like 30 really smart PR people on the phone, and none of us had ever been through anything like this, right? So what we decided to do was essentially set up a war room. And we did that in the form of an actual room at the Sheraton Hotel. It was open for, I think, a 2.5-week period. And all of the journalists that were coming to the city to cover the 1 year anniversary, we built a website where they could fill in their credentials. That, access to that information would give them an actual credential, and that credential got you access to the war room. So we had it open from like 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. every day for 2.5 weeks. It was staffed by our team and also, all different agencies and subject matter experts. So that was a place where they could come and check in with us. So we knew they were here, we knew who was here, And we wanted to make it as easy as possible for them. On, like I said, if you want to talk to the governor, their people are right here, and just, it was really a masterful thing of all of these different communications people and subject matter experts and agencies. And what was interesting was during that time, another hurricane started to approach New Orleans. I don't know if you remember that. Another storm was coming to New Orleans. And so that war room that was supposed to be about the 1 year anniversary of Katrina turned into, like, how are we going to cover this impending storm, right? And we were like flipping out, like, you cannot, like, seriously, now's the time for a storm to come. But then we were like, well, this is a great way to show that we're prepared, right? And this is a great way to show all of the lessons that we've learned in the past year and to tout the preparedness and the lessons and how we're gonna hopefully not go through another Katrina again. So that war room kind of had like a dual purpose for a little while, but it was a really cool thing to be part of. And the journalists that we hosted said that they appreciated it, kind of having everything in like a one-stop shop, even though they were all over the city covering a number of things, so. Okay. Yes?
I was wondering, since you have 2 degrees in psychology and mass communications, how do you combine that with what you're doing now?
Yeah.
Like, how do you combine psychology with what you're doing now?
Well, a lot of my classes were kind of the same, like classes on like human behavior and stuff like that comes in handy for communications. So to be fully honest, like I started off at LSU wanting to be a nurse, okay? And I sat in like one chemistry class and I was like, no, thank you, I can't do this. And so then I said, I'm gonna go be a psychologist, right? And then I realized, okay, I don't know that I wanna go all the way to my PhD. And so I was gonna minor in PR. And a lot of the classes overlapped between the journalism school and kind of the arts and sciences school. And there really wasn't, so I ended up getting the degree in psychology, but there wasn't that much of a difference between the minor in public relations and the major. So I just decided to just go ahead and get both degrees. So it's kind of been an interesting crossover, but I'll tell you, most of what I do every day and what I do in the office and what I've always done professionally, like you need the education, but a lot of it I've learned by doing, right? And that's why internships are so important. As much experience as you can get in the workforce, you need this, okay? You need Dr. Rogers, you need the education, but you also need that hands-on experience if you want to get hired. And so anything you can do to get those jobs, they just, things come up that you can't learn in a classroom. So let me just show you one more thing. Okay, there's just a fun video. Like I've got a bunch of cool stuff here, but I just want to show you this one video. This is one of the things we did to market New Orleans. And we did this like at kind of a very polarizing time in our country with politics and other things. But we wanted to show people what it's like in New Orleans, and that music is really a unifying thing. So let me see if I can show this. Here we go. Oh, wait. Here we go.
I'm very aware of the power of music and the power it has to bring communities together. It really is an emotional force that can change the way you think. That can then change the way you act.
That has nothing to do with beliefs. It has nothing to do with politics. It's about us being present together.
Thank y'all so much. Thank you. Do I have internships? Yes, actually. We do, yeah. So I give y'all my card. If anybody wants to email me about internships in PR or around our company, let me know. It's a great place to work. So thank y'all for having me. I'm happy to stick around. Thank you.